Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the city of Detroit became the largest municipality in our nation's history to file for bankruptcy. And without a doubt, the situation in Detroit is extreme, and their problems in part have been driven by local mismanagement, but it would be an oversimplification, and I think a dangerous oversimplification, for folks to continue to lay the entire responsibility for Detroit's situation on the failure of management. Since last week, Detroit's been on the front page of newspapers and has become the recent, poster child for municipal decline and insolvency. But for the few cities like Detroit that have actually filed bankruptcy, there are many other legacy cities in this country that continue to struggle day in and day out to provide basic services for their residents. Many municipalities are facing not just fiscal insolvency, but service-level challenges, perhaps not on the same scale as Detroit, but that does not mean that they are immune to the problems that Detroit are facing. My own hometown of Flint, Michigan, is on that same path and is struggling every day to provide basic services in an increasing period of fiscal stress. Detroit's bankruptcy should be a call to action, to have a much bigger conversation in this country about how we support and fund our cities and our great metropolitan areas. Cities are where our creativity takes place and where much of our wealth has been generated in the past, and that can and should be the future for America's cities. Let me be clear, bankruptcy for Detroit will not be a solution to its problems or for any other city. While it's arguable that this bankruptcy may be necessary, it will not be sufficient to solve the problem. It may bring order to an otherwise chaotic situation, but it will not solve the problem itself, and it will have real consequences for people in Detroit, in southeastern Michigan, and the entire state. You know, you can simply dissolve a corporation through bankruptcy, but you can't dissolve a city, which is a place where hundreds of thousands of people in this case live and raise their families. Lots of factors have contributed to the decline of a whole subset of America's cities: population loss, trade policy that moves jobs out of those communities or out of those cities into the metropolitan areas through land use practices, a municipal finance system that fails to recognize the realities of the 21st century. This is a big issue, and it's one that calls for a much larger national conversation about how we support our cities. But first, Mr. Speaker, we have to make sure to do no harm to these places that are struggling. The Republican budget that will come to this floor within the next few weeks proposes deep cuts to programs like the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Program, 40% cuts for programs that are intended to help communities reposition themselves in this challenged economy. Yet, at a time when cities are facing distress, like the city of Detroit, my hometown of Flint, many others, and the federal government could provide some help that would be in our national interest, we see cuts proposed to these really important programs. So whether at the state or federal level, we all have a role to play. It's time that all levels of government start thinking about the long-term sustainability of our cities, not just because it's good for those places, because it's in our national interest. Detroit's bankruptcy should be a day of reckoning for all of us, not just for the residents of the Motor City, but for everybody. Rethinking the way we support our cities and our metropolitan areas is not an easy conversation for us to have. It will be tough. It will cause us to challenge conventional thinking and challenge our own views of the importance of cities. These may be tough conversations, but they are absolutely necessary that we have to take on as a nation. We cannot sit idly by and pretend that Detroit won't matter and that it won't affect us and wait for the next Detroit to happen. It's important for our nation. It's important for our people. It's important for our competitiveness. It's important for our economy. It's important that we have a competitive place, and the only way we do that is with vital and rich, growing communities, and we have to get places like Detroit and Flint and Saginaw and Pontiac and other places that are important to this economy back on that trajectory. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.